Hello there, beautiful people. Welcome back to Emmy's Art Stuff. I'm Emmy. So I apologize up front. I've got a little bit of a cold going on right now, so my voice is just a little bit off, but this will be fun regardless. We're gonna have a good time today. I got a list in the description box below of all the materials I used for this video, so go ahead and check that out if you're interested in trying something like this. So today I'm going to tell you a little story about Valentine's Day. The story I'm going to tell you today is actually kind of a sad one, but not so much that it should get you down. It was a crazy experience on my end, and I know Steve wasn't the biggest fan of it, but it also involves one of the sweetest Valentine's Days that I've ever had. So it ends well, just so you know. So I'm going to kick off this story with the fact that I've had some health issues in the past. I used to get these little attacks, I guess you could call them, where my stomach would start hurting. It would become kind of hard for me to breathe. I had this attack happen to me one time while Steve and I were in Phoenix and getting ready to fly home. They're not good times, these attacks. So by this point in the start of 2016, I had had these attacks on multiple occasions. I think it was about 3 times. Then in early February, with plans made to have a good Valentine's Day together, I ended up having an attack again. A lot of times accompanied with these attacks, I would end up having to vomit, and it was not a pretty sight, but usually after I vomited, I would feel so much better. For this particular time in 2016, it was not getting any better. I think I puked a total of like 6 times before I was like, okay, something's really, really wrong. I was laying on our couch in our apartment, and it was about 3 o'clock in the morning when I decided that this was not going away and there was a real problem happening. I woke Steve up and asked him to take me to the emergency room, which, if you know me, it takes moving heaven and earth to get me to go see a doctor, let alone going to an emergency room. We arrived there in our pajamas in Chicago at the hospital that was closest to us. I think the woman who took down my information thought I was like a drug seeker. We were in our pajamas and we probably didn't look like the cleanest people in the world at that moment, but it was also the middle of the night. She didn't seem very convinced by my symptoms, but they decided to go ahead and get me a room and send in an actual doctor to figure out if I actually needed some medical attention. By the time I was in a room, I was sitting on one of their beds and my stomach hurt so bad. And I'm not talking about your tummy, I'm talking about your stomach, like just inside your rib cage, like where your actual stomach is. It hurt so bad. I couldn't move or sit or lay down comfortably at all. Steve was utterly helpless beside me, just watching me go through this awful, awful pain and not being able to do anything. It was horrendous for both of us. Finally, the doctor came in. She listened to me about my symptoms, just like they had in the emergency room. By this time, I'd explained myself like 4 or 5 times, and all I could think was, somebody please make this pain stop. It was literally a 10. I've almost never experienced such horrible pain. The only other time I have is another story for another time. The doctor listened to my symptoms, and she seemed also very skeptical of what was going on. She told me she thought I had some extreme heartburn and that it's possible for that to be the case as, I'm getting older and heartburn becomes more of a likely scenario. If this was heartburn, honey, I've never felt heartburn like this in my entire life, and there is no way it could have been heartburn. So she comes back into the room finally, it was probably maybe 10 minutes later, but it felt like an hour in pain time. And she's got this cup with this pink liquid, and she tells me, trust me, drink this. 10 minutes later, you're going to feel completely normal. And I'm sitting there going, Bish, I hope you're right. So I drink this pink liquid, and it was disgusting. I remember having to choke it down. It was just so thick and nasty. It was like one of those drinks that they try to cover up how bad it tastes by making it flavored like a strawberry or something, but then it makes it kind of more horrible. It's ironic that I'm telling this story right now as I'm actually kind of sick. So like a champ, I choke it down. It's disgusting, but I do it anyway because I have to start feeling some kind of relief sometime soon. I'm serious. I couldn't lay down or stand up or hunch over or do anything to get into any kind of comfortable position. 10 minutes goes by and Steve is watching me like a hawk and he's asking me, do you feel any better? And I'm like, no. 100% can tell you without a doubt nothing has changed. It hurts just as bad and I'm going to lose my mind. The doctor comes back in and she's like, all better? And I was like, no. She seemed a little bit surprised at this point because I'm pretty sure she started to believe that something was actually really wrong and that was not her original hypothesis. So she's like, okay, well, maybe there is more to this. We're going to go ahead and do a CT scan of your abdomen and we'll find out if there's anything like going on in your stomach. So they take me to get the CT scan. They inject this like weird fluid into my IV and like my body just got flush with cold. It was one of the strangest sensations I've ever felt. I lay there real still for them. They take some pretty pictures and then they wheel me back to my room. Again, can I just say, no pain relief at this point. So we end up waiting in that room for, I think it was probably close to an hour actually before the doctor finally comes back in. At this moment, her face has completely changed. Her behavior is much more serious, and I was like, oh no, what did they find? She looks at me and says, okay, we got your results back, and it looks like you have some gallstones, and they're pretty big. I'm like, okay, so what does that mean? And then she says, you're going to need surgery. By that time in my life, I'd only ever had one surgery, and that was to fix my busted eardrum. They had to take some skin from behind my ear and graft it over the eardrum, and that was pretty much it. Pretty simple in and out experience. But gallbladder surgery. Okay, never really dealt with that one. This was new territory. For those of you who don't know, your gallbladder is this weird pear-shaped organ that's under your liver. It's kind of like, you know how I was saying about the pain being isolated to my stomach? It's kind of right in that area. Basically, all it does is store bile, and it kind of helps your body break down fats before it goes into your intestines. They also warned me that after I would have the surgery, that my body would have trouble breaking down fats and that eating fatty foods would cause me to get sick to my stomach. I might not even be able to handle eating something as simple as fried chicken, bacon. When they told me no more bacon, I wanted to cry. I love bacon. She was like, okay, we're gonna get you admitted right now. And I was like, wait, whoa, what does this mean? Like, are we doing this right now? And she's like, well, no, we gotta get you admitted. We gotta get you off of food and water for a certain amount of time. You'll probably have surgery by sometime this evening. My head was just spinning. I know gallbladder surgery doesn't really sound like that big of a deal, and it ultimately probably was not that big of a deal, but in my head it felt like an emergency and my body was failing me. I felt panic. Sheer, utter panic. What does this have to do with Valentine's Day? Well, y'all are just gonna have to wait around and find out. I get admitted into the hospital. They take me up to my room. And at that time, we had bed bugs in our apartment, which I had to tell the hospital. So they put me on kind of like a quarantine type thing. Anytime someone had to come in to deal with my IV or anything that had to do with being near me, they all had to wear gowns. And let me tell you, this isolation protocol is the pits. I used to have to deal with this when I was a CNA, and I remember hating every second of it because you had to wear gowns, you had to wear shoes, you had to wear stuff over your head. Sometimes they made you wear goggles. Talk about making you feel dirty. There was nothing we could do about the bed bugs. That was absolutely 100% our landlord's issue. That's like a whole nother story. I know I keep saying that. I say that a lot. So again, I explain my issue to my nurse. She tells me no more water. I have always loved water. My entire life, I have always loved water. My parents have even told me stories of when I was a little kid and they would take us kids out to eat, which was a huge treat, and they would order drinks for all of us, and sometimes they would get us sodas or pops, depending on where you hail from. When I would get my soda, I would cry because I wanted water so bad. It's always been an issue. It's always been a thing. I've always had to carry water bottles with me anywhere I go. Always had to be prepared to spend a couple of dollars extra in case I ran out of water. And when I get thirsty, I would get to a point where I would get very panicky. And it's hard for other people who haven't experienced this to understand. Not a big deal. So they tell me no water. Steve gives me this look like, oh shit, because he knows. So the doctor came in and informed me that Saturday that, hey, you got type 2 diabetes. I was like, what did you just say? So not only are you telling me that I am going to be having surgery to have my gallbladder removed, but I also have type 2 diabetes. Fantastic. So they come in and they're giving me all kinds of information on different foods that I can eat, different foods that I should avoid, and I'm going, this is too much. This is too much. All at once, this is all happening right now. But it explained a lot. I call my parents, I let them know what's going on. They book it up to Chicago. It was like a 4.5, 5-hour drive for them. Since they finally figured out what the problem was, they were able to give me some medication that actually helped subdue the pain, although it never in its entirety went away. The surgeon gets in sometime that afternoon. He tells us, hey, my name's Dr. So-and-so. I'm going to be doing your surgery and blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, cool. And it turned out that he ended up having a surgery scheduled for that evening, so he couldn't do mine until tomorrow morning. I was like, okay, that's all right. That's okay. It's another 12 hours without any water. That's great. It's fine. This is fine. Everything's fine. Also, can I just mention that I was a smoker at the time, and the idea of going more than a couple of hours without a cigarette was like, it was torture for me. So I was quarantined to this hospital. I couldn't leave my room because of the bed bugs. I was in awful pain, and I couldn't smoke a cigarette. Ooh. So we ended up kind of finding ways to entertain ourselves that evening. My parents showed up and they were there the whole day. The following morning, the morning of my surgery, poor Steve had to work. There was no way he could get the day off. In the field that he works in, he has to be there or they're kind of screwed. There's nobody on call, nobody to cover for him. It's just pretty much, in that situation, it's just him. So he had to be there. Needless to say, he was incredibly worried. He ended up showing up to my hospital room at about 4 o'clock in the morning to hang out with me, to cuddle with me, to tell me everything was going to be okay. We kept swapping back and forth our fears of what the day was going to bring. At one point, he would be like, I'm so scared and I'm sorry I can't be here and I feel really bad. And I would be comforting him. And then the next second, I would be saying, I'm scared. I don't know what's going to happen. And I'm crying. And he'd be comforting me. And we just kind of swapped back and forth for a little while doing that. And then he had to leave for work. I fell back asleep. Morning came. The nurse came in to let me know that everything was going just as scheduled and that the surgery would be at 9 o'clock. My parents showed up and they were like, we're here, we're gonna stay here, and we're gonna wait for you. They were going to let Steve know when I was out of surgery and how everything went. Long story short, the surgery was supposed to last about 2 hours and ended up dragging into 4. My parents were concerned. Steve was super concerned, but it just turns out that the gallstones were enormous. 3 of these crazy gallstones had fused together to create this new creature. My surgeon actually referred to them as the 3-headed monster. I got to see a picture of them afterwards and was absolutely floored. I remember getting back to my room and my nurse telling me that she was going to get me something to help with the pain. I looked at her and said, "You're as beautiful as an angel," and then passed the hell out. The next week was pretty uncomfortable. It was difficult for me to sit up by myself. It was really, really hard to cough, like it hurt. And since I had just by force quit smoking, I had about a week of smoker's cough, which was brutal. That following week was Valentine's Day, and Steve had made plans before this whole debacle began for us to go out on the town. The day arrived, and I felt well enough to leave the apartment, so we decided to continue with our plans. He took me to my first ever jazz club, where we enjoyed a couple of drinks and listened to some fantastic music. Seriously, the guy rivaled Michael Bublé. This was the first time anyone had ever actually paid much attention to me on Valentine's Day, and I will say, despite the precursor of surgery, I had a blast. Just before everything had gone down, I'd gotten this lovely black dress that I planned on wearing on our night out. It looked great, other than the stomach band that was pretty obvious underneath the material. I remember that year of Valentine's Day very fondly, despite the obstacles to get there. It was really sweet. So let's go ahead and talk about this piece that I've got here. Obviously, it was inspired by my really weird and awful time of having gallbladder attacks. She's kind of funny, she's kind of goofy, but that's sort of what the entirety of my precursor to the surgery felt like. I mean, I've never been brave enough to pull off a shaved head, but she's just a cute little character. I thought it'd be fun. So happy Spew-entine's Day, everybody. So here's the part of the video where I beg you to like, subscribe, and ring the bell just like every other YouTuber. Don't forget to follow me at Emmy's Art Stuff on Instagram. And I've got a really cool painting and a new story for you guys next week. So don't forget to stop by every Wednesday for super cool, super fun, super fresh content every single week. Until next time, stay creative.